Greetings and welcome to this first board game review video. Just as I review Monsters, and if you are new to this channel, you just came by to check this out, I do actually review Monsters. That's monsters of mythology, games, movies, everything. But I'm also going to be reviewing board games. And similarly to the other videos, I will be scoring them in different categories, although at the end of these videos, I will be giving them a grade scoring. Now, the first game today will be my beloved Village Attacks. Beloved, why? Well, first of all, it is the game that arrived with a bunch of miniatures, which I was looking forward to get back into painting, as I haven't been at that point painting for many years. Not only did that bring me back into that, but really this was my reintroduction, sort of, to board gaming. And so let's get at it. Village Attacks is a tower defense type of game. You play as the monsters. That's why I got it. That was a big selling point behind it. You play as the monsters and you have peasants, heroes, and hunters that break into your castle and they want to defeat it. They want to destroy it. So you as a couple monsters defend the castle. There are different scenarios now. It's not always just defend. For example, there's one where you have to take several peasants into the kitchen to prepare them for your dinner. But all in all, you are in your environment and the humans are the ones that are coming into your territory and messing with you. I mean, doesn't that just sound like them? Let's talk about the quality of the game. It fits nicely into the box, no issues. So storage is good. The dungeon crawler type of map for the castle are tiles, are regular cardboard type of tiles that you would get with a, not a linen necessarily texture, but that kind of texturing. They're not necessarily very thick. So overall, pretty average there as far as these types of games go. As far as, is there anything that really takes the game over the top in the quality that you're looking at? There is one thing, and that's a flip coin. Because it is a metal flip coin that you flip to decide, for example, which way are the villagers going to go to attack you if the distances are the same. And that's just something you don't often see in non-premium situations. Usually you'll get all plastic or wooden parts. But in this case, that coin is actually a metallic coin. So that is a little bit of a premium aspect there. All in all, that coin can be annoying sometimes to use if you're flipping all the time and you're not a good flipper and maybe it's getting out of control and falling somewhere else and you're trying to maintain your space in your game. So as a part of a solution for that, I did download an app, a dice rolling app, and in this app you can put as many dice sides as you want. So you can make a two-sided dice or a three-sided dice or as many sides as you want. I found that to be a nice solution to constantly having to flip. But anyway, that coin is a nice touch. The rulebook is overall okay, layout's decent, but the rules in general can be a bit questionable here and there, especially with the different monster types and how that monster's thing or abilities are going to work with a specific hero's abilities, and that's where you gotta get on the internet and look for the answers. It's a pretty decent average rulebook. I guess one odd factor is that it includes rules for an expansion that you don't get initially with the core game. It could actually be a pretty decent marketing maneuver for the company to push the consumer to want to get the expansion. Nothing over the top in this game and nothing really terrible about it. So I'm going to go ahead and for overall quality for the game, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 4. Now, as for the table space, these minis that are included here are 32mm scale. And the modular maps, the modular tiles that go with it, don't have squared off points on them. They're basically, each tile is a room or a corridor or something like that. So basically, when you have the game laid out, you just have the modular tiles. You have your dice, you have the minis, however you're organizing that and wherever you're keeping the rest of the box and the stuff that you're not using. But then you have the hero or your monster dashboards, your characters, your monsters that you're playing. And if you are playing solo, and again, all these board game review videos are for playing solo, you're going to be controlling about 3 monsters, but the dashboards are about this big. There's nothing that necessary. There's little tiles for upgrading abilities on there, but there's nothing that makes them necessary to be that big. And then the modular map and all the other stuff, it starts to take a little bit more space space than it really needs to. Everything else are cards, and there's smaller cards, so that's nice because that also takes less space. And then there's the game board that has different dials, and even that isn't overly sized to have cards put on it. It has like a section where you can overlay them on there. So overall, the space is well utilized. I would only say that the thing that takes too much space a little bit are the character dashboards, the monsters that you're playing, but they are your monsters after all, and people like to have their nice character representations. So all that said, there are also a lot of minis. This game comes with 66 very nice miniatures. You're going to have your few monsters that are always on the board, but then you're going to have all your peasants starting to bunch up because you start to get a lot of peasants, and then hunters, and then least of all, which are the heroes. So that will start to take up a good space as well. But you can always fit them in. Since it's a modular board game, you have a lot of different spaces that are created with different layouts, and I like to work with those spaces to kind of organize things. Even though I have more space, I just like that because everything is in reach and you don't have to get crazy moving around and everything's right there and it looks good. So for table space, especially for a game with miniatures, I have to give it a 3 out of 4, almost a 4. If it weren't for those dashboards being as big as they are, they're nice, but if that was shrunk down a little bit, I could see this at a 4 out of 4. We're going to go into the minis now. So as far as the mini quality, this is an important part for me. And I know for a lot of people that buy these kind of games, they do care about the minis. And so I had to give them their own, very own category. And with the minis here, they look good. As far as oversized, undersized issues, there aren't too many. I think the only areas I really saw those were in expansions that I got, or additional monster and hero characters that I got as stretch goals. What I would see is with the Wendigo and the Native American heroes, the female character was oversized, the male character was clearly undersized, and you can really see that when you start comparing them with all the other characters and things like that. That female character is just really tall. If you straightened her legs out, she would be taller than most miniatures. So this is a common thing that can happen with a lot of miniatures, and it does need to be looked at. There's that instant and maybe one or two other ones that I've noticed. The monsters, I have to say, are overall great. The miniatures are very nice. The poses, the whole design, again, going from that first concept artist. Not too many glued on pieces and parts. They don't get too complicated as far as miniatures and models go, but their poses and everything and the idea behind them really works, and a lot of them I could see being my favorite of that type of monster. For example, take a look at all your vampire miniatures and then take a look at the vampire that you get with the core box. It's a really nice vampire, and I've noticed that with a lot of them. Before I move on and before I forget, I have to mention this miniature. There's a lot of great ones here and a lot of great ones in the expansion, but this Undertaker looking character, this hero, I love this one. And actually, as far as molding and miniatures go, he's a pretty simple one. But if you know Hero Quest, if you had the first original Hero Quest or grew up around that, you had the iconic white dwarf. You would have that dwarf paint up on Games Workshop magazines and stuff like that. And, you know, that was an iconic, amongst other iconic things in that game. And this guy, for me, since the first day I saw him just standing there with that huge axe, that was a very iconic pose and just mini and very cool character you can just use for your D&D games or whatever. So speaking of the heroes, they are great as well. They are on par with the monsters in this game. They are almost over the top in quality for a board game. Again, the ones I've probably have seen the most sizing issues with, but as far as taking those miniatures and, for example, taking a ranger type mini or enchanter type mini from this game and comparing it with other minis out there, you might find yourself wanting to replace whatever enchanter you're using or wizard in your game of D&D and replacing it with one of the heroes from Village Attacks. Now, as for the lowest tier miniatures and characters, you will have the hunters, which hunters are specific to focus on monster types, and then peasants are just your general human flock. Those miniatures are fine. The hunters in particular have nice poses, nice different poses. And because of the funding of the game, you have a decent, nice variety of different, for example, peasants. You don't just have one model peasant, you actually have 4. And for hunters, I believe you have 4 as well. So you have a nice variety of those more basic type of human attackers. So as for the final scoring on the minis, I would have to say that you're pretty much getting what you would want, if not a little bit higher than your expectations, especially for what you're paying. I give them a 3 out of 4. They're excellent board game minis, or in general minis, but just not over the top great or premium. As for the setup of the game now, that's sometimes a big deal breaker for people, is how long it takes to set up. This is a dungeon crawler type of game, right? You got modular tiles, and those tiles are always the bigger part of the headache of setting up, because you're gonna have to find the different specific ones to lay out. But the point is, you lay them all out at one time. There's nothing that is unseen that you're gonna lay out later. I believe there's a total of 4 different decks of different sizes, so not too bad. And if you're playing advanced mode, like there's a night and day cycle and mode with the troll and things like that, if you're playing the full advanced mode, then there's not much additional that you have to do for that. Just a couple more things you put down, small things, and that's it. So overall setup is pretty good, if not great. Again, because it's modular, the setup is pretty open. You can put your cards here, it doesn't really matter, with the exception of the game overview tile that I mentioned earlier. You're going to have a deck on top of it, you're going to have some trap cards there, and then the dials and everything is built into that. So you're going to have to set off a little section for that. As far as tokens, the tokens are not overwhelming in this game. You're going to be using a lot of like damage tokens, different spell effects, placeholders, things like that, and then tokens for other different effects. But overall, the tokens are not that many, and you can actually, after a few plays, realize how many tokens you actually use, especially when playing solo, and the rest you can just keep in the box in the baggie. And as far as the game storage there, it doesn't translate to any organization really on the table. There aren't any token trays or anything that you can use from there. You're not collecting any items in game or anything like that. It is a pretty simple game that more relies on developing skills. So for that reason, with everything that you're utilizing and for the type of game that it is, I'm gonna have to give this actually a 4 out of 4 for setup. Of course, it could be quicker, but if you're dealing with modular tiles, you can't get it all down much quicker than this. So for my next category at this point, I'm not actually sure what I'm going to name it. It might be what I'm calling it for now, and that is finicky or finickiness. I think that covers a nice range in that topic of rule complexity, how well they're expressed in the rulebook and all of that. Village attacks overall is not very finicky. Every once in a while, you will have to probably go online and clarify something, especially once you get additional different monster types to play as. And so for finickiness, I'm going to have to give village attacks a 3 out of 4 because you just shouldn't have to go online for answers. You should have it all here and laid out nicely. But with that, still the gameplay and everything is really quite fluid and smooth to play. As for my next category, we will be looking at satisfying moments, those high points during the game and how often they occur. The mechanics of the game flow nicely, the custom dice work, small mitigations for them, everything goes well together. It's very pleasant, it's very enjoyable to play, keeps moving, everything is pretty clear, and then the leveling up, probably the leveling up is one of the best parts, is one of the highest points, right? When you level up and unlock a new ability or advance one of your abilities. Traps are another one. Traps, basically, as you'd imagine, you place a trap somewhere, and if everything works out and the villagers head into that trap and you kill off a bunch of them, that is quite a satisfying moment. And speaking of that devious troll can be actually friend or foe. If you indeed don't have the troll, remember the troll rules are in the core rulebook. So if you have a big giant or troll or ogre type mini on hand, you can actually use that to replace the troll that's specifically made for village attacks. But the troll really does add some satisfying moments, because at the flip of a coin, that troll can move either towards your castle heart, which is the actual life, the magical life of the castle. It can hurt your characters, your monsters, or it can damage villagers and then get out of the castle. It can be really fun to see what it's going to do next, and you can use it kind of as a trap. Unfortunately, when it walks into one of your traps, well, you lose your trap and you can't really kill or damage the troll, but you can make it angry. So the troll is definitely a piece that you gotta play with when you play this game. And so for satisfying moments, Village Attacks scores a 2 out of 4, but that also maybe depends on how often you play. Again, this is all solo talk, but the fighting and the limited dice mitigation gets a little old and grindy over time, and also a higher amount of levels that you could gain would really be nice and fun, because I think the total is 5 times total that you can level up, which is a decent number, but at least 2 more would be really nice, and it would raise those amounts of satisfying moments, maybe 1 more skill, and that could easily be done since those dashboards are this big, and each skill like token thing is like this big an area. You could just make that a little bit smaller, make a 4th one to just have more skills and options to look at. But I understand they also wanted to get in a lot of monsters and make every monster feel different. Having each skill go a 3rd level up would have been awesome. Combos would have been a nice addition, as well as more different sort of objectives throughout the gameplays. That would have been nice to see as well. It is a simple, fun game with not much depth to it, and sometimes that's just what you need. But if you want to delve into something with more lore and things like that, and actually working through a game and looking forward to solving something or figuring something out, this game's a little bit too simple for that. So I think 2 out of 4 is fair. And as for the next category, we have choices. The amount of hero options and monster options you get in the core box is good, but soon you're going to be wanting more. You're going to be curious in how different and your favorite monsters, how they play. And that's also one of the high points in this game, is finding your favorite monster out there. And a lot of them Village Attacks does cover, bringing it in this world and just wreaking havoc with it, even though they invaded your home. As far as scenarios, there are 5 starting scenarios where you actually learn the game slowly, and I really appreciate those. And then after those 5, you have 5 additional utilizing all the rules. And then after those, there's actually scenarios in the rulebook again for an expansion that doesn't come with this game. It would be nice to have more scenarios. There were more downloadable ones. There was even a nice Christmas one, but they're really hard to find on the internet now. But you do also have those advanced options, such as day and night modes. They sort of contrast the game and make the highs higher and the lows lower. There's also the Troll Edition, which that's really fun to play with. The different level abilities, the different traps. There's not too many different traps, but there's a decent amount. So for choices and options, variety, I give Village Attacks actually a 3 out of 4. For everything that is alone in the core box that's playable, even taking out the troll as an option, then I would have to say it's about a 3, but could drop to a 2, depending on your game library, how often you play the game. See what's relevant for you when we do the final scoring. And next we have a category that I call Intrigue. Just how much of a desire and of a curiosity do you have to go back and play this game? In Village Attacks, the intrigue really comes in when you're wanting to play new types of monsters, or you want to try a different combination of monsters. That's what really pulls you back in. But overall for the game, that intrigue starts high and drops really quick, because soon after you get back into the grind, especially if you're going into scenario after scenario, just battling off a bunch of humans and with skills that are just not going high enough or advancing into different enough varieties and things like that. As that is where it all comes down to, with a score of 2 out of 4 for Intrigue. If you really want to keep the intrigue alive with this game, you have to steadily, over time, get more expansions, try different things, but it's always nice having that big variety of different heroes too. Expansions keep the intrigue alive. So overall, for the score, out of 32 points going over all these categories, Village Attack earns a 23 out of 32, but I am not done yet. As next, I'll be going over personal preferences, where I'll be adding and subtracting points there too. And I do recommend you join me in this portion of the scoring, because here you can more focus down on a more accurate scoring for yourself, looking at my opinions and how persuasive I can be of adding another point or subtracting. So let's take a look at these and see if we can bring this game over a C grade. So first off, we have lore. That was one of my first kind of feels about the game, is that there just isn't much lore to each scenario. There isn't, it all does connect the little paragraphs here and there, and it is a simple game, and it's not that sort of game necessarily, but I do like having a bit more of that lore in there just to make me more immersed and also committed to wanting to play more and to read the next one, especially if you're a person like me where you won't read on until you have played and beaten a scenario. So if you kind of feel the same thing, go ahead and subtract 1 point for lore. Next is luck. A bit too luck-based here. There is some dice mitigation. It comes through skill and as well as a general rule, but that's about it for mitigation, and it just doesn't occur enough, and many times you can just get handfuls of dice that really are just bad and ruin a scenario where you may have been doing great. If you feel you agree with my feels on this here, then please subtract 1 point from that initial 23 points that we gave the game. As for the theme now, I'm gonna have to share positive feels on that, because I was really turned on by the idea that I get to finally play the monsters and hit it back and just fight and kill a bunch of heroes trying to ruin my days of being evil. And also, every monster by default has a ranged attack and a melee close combat attack. So that is expressed by the miniatures as well. As that is a rule in the game, you will notice that some of the monsters, you wouldn't expect that they have a ranged attack, but then they have some daggers on them or something. That's why the monster design and the miniature design is really good, because it has also their fighting style, which is both ranged and close in mind. On the back of the dashboards, you can see other concept art, sketches, and ideas for that monster, and even lore explained about it. I mean, real life lore as far as the monster's mythology. Those little touches and that initial thing, just what this game is, I give that at least a +1. I gave it a +1. If you really feel it, you can even give it a +2. But I'm doing just one. Another personal preference I'm going to bring up is game length. The game length can be a bit long with certain scenarios because, I mean, it's a simple game. So in the end, you're going to be doing the same thing over and over again with your limited skill amount. And so you will start to feel some scenarios really start to drag and become repetitive. So for that, I have to subtract another point. Another personal preference I have is for originality. Now, this game isn't that unique or original or amazing of a concept of an idea, but it is unique enough that there's not much of it. It pretty much took what is Zombicide, made it more about defending an area, which actually is clever because if you have a core box that's limited in amount of content and you make a game like Zombicide where you're going to different new areas, well, you're going to have to start repeating because there's only so many tiles you can fit. So making a defense style system, it makes sense that tiles repeat. So it's actually clever to do that. But also they simplified the game and therefore it's not convoluted at all. For that, I will give it 1 point for an originality. I have been harsh on it in other areas, so I do want to give it that 1 point. Go ahead and add that in if you agree with me, if I've been persuasive enough. And then I'm going to have to give it 1 point for being easy to learn and being a great introductory game into a couple different areas. Being an introduction into board gaming in general, I would definitely recommend this. An introductory game to board games with minis and to dungeon crawler types of games. This one would be my place to go if somebody wants to play something with miniatures, monsters, and fight, but they don't want to get into the heavier stuff like, you know, Gloomhaven and other D&D closer levels of complexity games out there. As well as people that want to get into solo gaming, this is also a great introduction to that. I'm a little biased here also because it was my first board game, really getting deep into this hobby, but I think because of those scenarios that teach you how to play and just how it's structured, it is not hard and doesn't take long to set up, and it takes what is Zombicide side and so popular and big, and makes it even friendlier to newcomers in the board gaming. So for that, I do have to give it a point for being easy to learn and teach. Overall, this game still stays at a 23 out of 32. So the scoring didn't change, even if you went through that with me, but maybe for you it did if you found some of those personal preferences that spoke less or more to you than they did for me. So always make sure to listen to that part of my reviews, as that will really focus down your specific scoring. It's not just dependent on my scoring. Now you're getting involved with scoring as well, to seeing really if this game is for you. So a 23 out of 32, which is a C-. So hope you enjoyed this very first board game review and the scoring system. I'm hoping to make these a lot quicker and to the point, and so you're just getting the scores and all the information out there as fast as possible. I'll see you in the next one.